During the time that David was king, a while after Goliath was slayed with the slingshot. The time of year, it was spring hot. It was the season when kings fought, so it was time to fight. So he sent Joab to smash on the Ammonites, and God's army was bruising them. They need David, so he stayed in Jerusalem. One afternoon, David awoke and took a stroll on the rooftop, and he was walking with the cool bop. But then something made dude stop, and he said, "What's that?" It was a beautiful woman and she was taking a bath. Woo! He should have turned red, he should have turned his head, but he stared instead. 5 minutes went past, he was drooling a little when his heart started beating real fast. And he had started meditating and fantasizing and contemplating ways that he could get her to the palace for a dating without a bunch of waiting so they could have relations. So he sent one of his guys to find out who the baby is in building number 5. He came back and said, "This news you would dislike, Uriah the Hittite, that is his wife." David said, "I am his king, this is my land, her here you bring. Now, beat it!" Dude was so shocked and he couldn't believe it. He knew he shouldn't do this horrible act, but he said, "I have a head and I'd like to keep it attached." He went back and said, "How can I say this? Your presence is requested by King David." She got dressed and left, cause saying no to the king was punishable by death. And it was almost too late to stop, cause lust already had its hooks in David's heart. He was fanning the flames of desire, and all his good judgment was burning in the fire. So later that day, she came to the palace and together they lay. She knew her husband she betrayed, so she went home cause she knew she couldn't stay. After about 30 days, she got in touch with Dave and told him she was late. She wasn't talking about a meeting, but the lake that means inside her womb another heart is beating. David said, "Don't worry, this was in the days before there was Maury. There's no DNA to say you are not the father," but David had a way. He told Joab to send me Uriah so I can talk to him, get him out the line of fire. Why? Because David had a scheme of Uriah coming home and getting with Bathsheba. You know, so they could have relations. And 9 months later, she tell him, "Congratulations!" And it would all be gravy, knowing all the while that the baby was David. The next day, when Uriah came to the palace, knelt and said, "Sire, you called for me?" And David said, "Oh, I just want to find out how the war was coming along." Uriah felt good, like, "David asked me?" He said, "We killing them. It should be over in 3 months. We wish that you was there to see us." He said, "I'm back here doing king stuff. We got soldiers on the east and the west." David cut him off and said, "Okay, that's great, go get some rest." But Uriah was a stand-up guy. He didn't go home, he spent the night outside. The next morning when David went down to the courtyard, he found Uriah sleeping on the ground. He bent down and said, "Dude, are you berserk? I tell you to go home, but find you sleeping in the dirt. You've been gone for a year. That's kind of strange. Being out there with those men hasn't brought about a change, has it? Picked up some bad habits? This is the Lord's army and you know I can't have it." Uriah said, "No sir, I'm all man, but you was in the service, surely you can understand God's ark and his army, sleeping in tents and fields. No way that I could be convinced to chill with my wife, whining and dining, while my fellow soldiers are fighting and dying." He said, "I stay here for the night, and then tomorrow morning I will send you back to fight." He sent an invite to Uriah the Hittite and told him he can dine with the king. After a lot of persuasion and a little conversation, they had ate and he had started drinking. And every time he would drink the wine in his cup, David would wave at his servants and say, "Fill it up." And he was drunk as a skunk. He hadn't had that much to drink in many months. And he was staggering, his words were slurred, and he said, King David, you are great and you deserve this." But the king was sober. He said, thank you. Now won't you go on over to your house, lay with your spouse, kiss her on the mouth, grab a hold of her blouse, and you know. Uriah said, yeah, I like how that sound. He walked out the palace and passed out on the ground. David said, I see this won't be easy, so I think I better go with plan B. The next morning when David awoke, he got his pen and his pad and he wrote Joab a note. He said, put Uriah on the front lines, then move everybody else, leave him there and let him die. And then he signed King David, gave it to Uriah and he said, please take it to the field. Homie, it was real, I'm glad we got the chill. Do it again, we will, so don't get killed. Uriah said, oh, I won't. Until the next time, your highness, I'm gone. Hopped on his horse and left, and with a smile on his face, he delivered his death. Yes, Joab got the note, put him on the front lines. One time, it was all she wrote. And he was slayed in the fighting, but technically he was killed by David's writing. And when the king got the report, he said, hey, that's war. Ain't nobody out there too good for the sword. And Bathsheba mourned, and a couple days later, David sent for. They got married and had a kid, but the Lord, he was very upset with what David did. And so he sent Nathan in to tell David a story, and it went like this. There was two men from a certain town. One was rich and one was broke. Okay. The rich man owned plenty animals and land, but one lamb did the poor man own. And he loved this little lamb. Why not? Cause it was his. It was part of his family, even grew up with his kids. And it would lay in his lap and cuddle up. It even ate from his plate and drank from his cup. But one day the rich man had a visitor, wanted to kill a sheep so he could cook a big dinner up. But instead of going out to his barn, he snatched the poor man's little lamb out his yard. Killed him, served him up to his guest. David was furious and said, that man deserves death. Matter of fact, he better give him 4 just to make up for the poor man's land that he stole. Nathan said, yeah, you're right, this is true, but the Lord God says that the rich man is you. I made you king, gave you everything you need. How could you even think of such a horrible deed? You killed Uriah, yeah, you took his life. And to make matters worse, you went back and took his wife. Therefore, there will always be a sword in your family. There will be peace no more. David confessed to Nathan, put his head in his hands, and he said, I have sinned. Nathan said, the Lord forgives. You will not die, but the child won't live. And David hoped he can change his mind, so he fasted. But 7 days later, the baby died. There's more than one moral to the story, cause all men have fallen short of God's glory. But if you find yourself in sin, you can repent, turn around, but never go back again. And lust is a dangerous thing, ready to sting every being from teens to kings. Watch out.